Hell, you could say that 10,000 times and it still wouldn't be enough.
It fires me up, man.
I love it. Say it one more time.
Shake and bake!
Does that feel good?
Yeah, it rhymes. They're both verbs.
And welcome back to the latest, greatest episode of the Shaving Points podcast. We are joined, as always, by my co-host, Jayton May, and by the football grump. How are we doing tonight, boys?
Fantastic.
What's going on, guys? Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
NFC East, baby.
That's right.
The Beast.
Back to beast form, right?
Absolutely. The NFC Beast. That's my favorite nickname for a division. It's the only one I can even think of. But
yeah.
Grump, why don't you tell the people where they can find you, find your work, and tell them what you do?
So I have a Giants podcast called the Just Giants Podcast. We're on YouTube and SoundCloud. You can just look up Just Giants Podcast. You can see all that information right there on the screen. I also I get really into the NFL draft completely like on my own. I just do stuff. So I just launched my own football grump YouTube channel as well. I put up a couple videos at the end of the draft that we just had. I was just kind of testing things out, feeling how things are going. And this whole year, I'm going to be doing a lot more like college football stuff lead into the draft. So I'm a little bit more prepared for draft stuff. And and that's where you can find me right on there.
Yeah.
Quentin loves draft.
Absolutely. So I actually met Grump at the Senior Bowl this year. We were looking at draft prospects. So it was a good time. Who doesn't love draft prospects?
Oh, dude, so much fun. And also, you saw me in that Under Armour hoodie that's right there on the screen. That was the last I saw of that hoodie. I left it in Alabama, and I will never see it again.
Yeah, I mean, I bet that's not even surprising because it was like 50 degrees, 80 degrees, 50 degrees, 80 degrees.
Were you one of the people?
The
did you get a wicked sunburn that first day?
Oh yeah.
But only half your body, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it was. That was the most sunburned men I've ever seen in my life in one place. It was just ridiculous.
Pretty sure Quentin gets a sunburn at night.
Yeah. I actually try to. That's why I'm in the basement. I just try to stay away from any light in general.
Absolutely.
But let's get into the Giants. So, Grump, I sent you a few questions beforehand, and the first one was, what is the state of the New York Giants? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So, yeah, I mean, it's really exciting. We're in year 2 of the Brian Daboll coaching tenure, year 2 of the Daboll Kafka offense, year 2 of the Wink Martindale defense, and year 2 of the Joe Schoen front office. They sort of, I try to, the Just Giants podcast and me in general as a person, I try to temper enthusiasm off the field. You know, at the stadium, I'm balls to the wall. Everything is the end of the world or the best play ever. But when it comes to when I get home and I pull it back a little bit, I try to be as realistic as possible. And I would say that the Giants overachieved last year. They won a lot. And I would say due to a lot of really good, savvy coaching, they won a lot of very close games. They hung tight in games they frankly probably did not belong in. And they were able to squeak out some crazy wins. I mean, immediately what comes to mind is the Packers game in London. The Ravens game at home was a huge upset from my perspective. I did not expect that game to go the way it did. And with that, as the year went on, more and more trust was built between the coaching staff, the roster. There were guys that had no vote of confidence whatsoever who ballooned all the way up the depth chart. I mean, think of Darius Slayton was a healthy scratch week 1, completely earned a new 2-year contract. Daniel Jones, his 5th-year option was declined, went into it and came out of the season with a playoff appearance win and a new 4-year contract. So as the year went on, that overachieving team seemed to really gel together as a legit team that was operating on a completely minimal cap with almost no space to do anything. They were kind of throwing together anything that would work. And now we go into this year, they had a lot more cap space to work with. They re-signed a bunch of guys. They brought in some new guys to fill some holes. They had a pretty good draft. And expectations are really, really high. The state of the Giants right now, I would say, is euphoric around just the Giants Twitter. I'm sure training camp. I'm headed to training camp tomorrow morning. So I'll get my first personal dose of that. But everyone is very, very excited. They're high on building off of last year. So it's a good time to be a Giants fan, especially after some of the darkest days that the franchise has ever seen.
Yeah, I'm the way you said that, some of the darkest days the franchise has seen. Like when I was throwing this together, one of the things we put up on the graphic is like a 5-year record. And 28, 53-1 after a 9-7-1 season, that's rough. I mean, that had to be hard for Giants fans to go through, and it's like there's some light at the end of the tunnel here for you guys. That's exciting.
Oh yeah. So what we did on our last Just Giants was, and it just kind of occurred to me. I was like thinking, I was talking to my co-host, the Cranky Fan, and I kind of asked him. I was like, does this feel at all like, coming into, because he predates me with some stuff here. I was born in 1987, so I missed that. I grew up through the 90s Giants, which were terrible. I grew up with Dave Brown. I grew up with Danny Cannell. And I remember when the coaching switch happened and around the year 2000, and, they go to the Super Bowl around then. And I asked him if it felt like that, because I was a little too young to know. And like back then, I mean, you're reading the newspaper for your sports news. And he likened it even further back to coming out of the 70s, which was an awful time for Giants. So if he says that, then I would say it's at least in the conversation for some of the darkest days in franchise history.
Yeah. So on a lighter note, what is something you're really excited about for the Giants this year?
Well, I mean, a lot of the things I said, I'm just as excited as other Giants fans for year 2 of Jones, Daboll, and Kafka working together. So one of the things that was really striking is Daniel Jones has never really had a consistent offensive coordinator or scheme. And one of the early stories coming out was that Brian Daboll just approached Daniel Jones and asked him flat out, like, what kind of plays do you like to run? So a lot of media people early on were asking Mike Kafka, is this a lot of the Chiefs offense? Asking Brian Daboll, is this a lot of the Bills offense? And the resounding answer was, no, this is the Giants offense. We built this, the three of us. We made this together. So now, as you watch Daniel Jones throughout last year blossom into, a more fluid player, a more comfortable player, a more vocal leader, that's definitely something to be excited about. And last year they're operating with like no cap space whatsoever. They a completely inherited roster. And meanwhile, Joe Schoen had to operate a draft in 2022 with front office people that got fired right at the end. I mean, he's working with scouts that he's not super comfortable with. Even with that, now we have a whole new year with Paris Campbell brought in, Darren Waller brought in, drafting John Michael Schmitz is huge. Bringing in Bobby Okereke on defense to supplement a linebacker group that was not good for as long as I can remember. It's definitely exciting in the short term for me to think about year 2 of this and continuing to build. But I kind of sat back and was thinking about it. The thing I might be most excited about for the long term with this team is Joe Schoen. Is it possible? I mean, I'm on the insider perspective here where it's Giants 24/7 for me. You guys, not so much. Is he really being considered possibly one of the better GMs in the NFL right now? A super young guy with great coaching hires, a really good relationship with this young coach that he has. He retained 4 first-round picks in one offseason between Dexter Lawrence, Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones, and who am I forgetting? Boy, that sucks. Dexter Lawrence. Oh, man. I feel stupid right now. Andrew Thomas, of course. The one they just did, the left tackle. So 4 first-round picks re-signed in one offseason and managing to – I mean, just the balance of Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones and getting them both done at once was difficult enough as it is. I'm definitely excited for Joe Schoen. The front office philosophy is totally different than traditional Giant stuff. And it looks like, players come and go over time. Players get hurt. They move on. You don't have the money to keep them. But your front office is your front office. And he's a young guy that can be here for a really long time. So I'm really excited for that. Kind of a lame answer. But
No. Giants definitely seem like a team on the rise, signing their young guys. I'm not sure if we really absolutely know what Daniel Jones is right now, but I think at the very worst, he's a frisky quarterback. But how do you think they're going to do in this NFC beast of a division where, I mean, I don't think it's arguable that at best you're the third best team in the division. So it's like, are you confident against Philly and Dallas? And I mean, Washington's not even going to be a rollover this year if they can get some decent quarterback play too. So it's going to be a brutal division. So like, what are your thoughts on how you'll be able to compete this year?
It's a tough division, and I think that's the hardest thing working against them. I think around the league, I think they're a top team, as in like in the upper half. But it's tough, right? Like the Eagles are the class of the NFC, as much as I hate to say all of those words in one sentence. Dallas is no slouch whatsoever. Even like you said, even Washington, especially now that Daniel Snyder's out, I mean, they're only going to continue getting better as far as I can see over time. As far as this year, no, you're not going to like this, but I actually think at best the Giants are the second best team in this division. That's at best. But, I mean, there's a lot at play there, and a lot can fall apart really quickly. I have less confidence in Dak Prescott than I think a lot of people. But, I mean, like what you said about we don't know what Daniel Jones is absolutely correct. I'm not going to sit here and argue with you on that one. Like, one good year does not negate a whole bunch of other film. My biggest thing is with Dallas is I'm more worried about I just don't know how to handle that defense. That is really what I struggle with.
They could probably have the best defense in the league.
Yeah.
With the deepest like players at every single position on defense too. I mean, they're 2 or 3 deep almost everywhere.
Yeah, I don't really know how you deal with Dallas's defense. I'm less worried about having to keep pace with their offense. I mean, you could play this back in a couple weeks, and I could sound like a total fool.
They got 3 really good receivers.
Like I said, I don't love Dak Prescott, and I really don't love.
Trust me, brother.
Coach.
Not a whole lot of people do.
I am not a big McCarthy guy. Not at all.
I think coaching is definitely the weakest part of the Dallas team, and then depth at running back, and then Dak is what he is. I mean, he's Josh Allen.
So steering it back towards the Giants a little bit, we had one more question for you here. Of what's the thing you're most nervous about for the upcoming season?
Expectations. One good year. I try to stay very measured. Like I said, they started the year as like an overachiever. They surprised some people. I think some good coaching got them out of some tight situations. So my personal expectations for the team is to see visual improvement. That may not be reflected in the record. It may not even be reflected in some stats. But if I go there and I feel like this offense is finally humming, which it certainly was not really doing last year, it had its moments. It had good drives when they needed it. But overall, they were not some offensive juggernaut. Defensively, they relied a lot on just generating fake pressure through exotic blitzes and stuff. And that's awesome. And I love that stuff. But as far as natural pressure on 4-man rushes and even on some 5-man rushes, it just wasn't there. So for me, I'm looking to see things kind of continue to improve, even if it doesn't mean more wins. For Giants fans, I think that might be a hard pill to swallow. I think that's going to be tough to hear that they might have less wins this year than last year, even though the roster's better. It's the second year in the system, this, that, and the other thing. And I'm worried about fan expectations for first-round pick Deonte Banks. I am of the belief that cornerbacks out of the draft, that is like the toughest situation to be put in. It's a high confidence position, and it's a huge jump from the college level to the NFL level. I mean, some of the best receivers have some crazy footwork. Some receivers are simply unguardable no matter who's there. And if you get a young guy too down on himself and a fan base that's all over him, it can spell disaster for somebody like that. So my expectations for Deonte Banks personally are probably a lot lower than most other Giants fans, and that's really what I'm most nervous about. And also, just in general, this team, the depth is kind of shaky. So any health problems they have could derail everything.
I think that's a great point. On the second point on the depth, But on Deonte Banks, man, I want to hype him up. I love that guy, man. He was one of my favorite players in the draft.
I love him too. He's like a really humble guy. He got like no Power 5 letters in the mail, and Maryland was his first one. It's his home state. He was happy to go there. Even then, like he wasn't like nationally ranked or anything like that. He was a very, very low ranked guy. He stayed humble, stayed hungry, and look at his film. He earned his first round pick slot, Giants or otherwise.
Yeah. So I got a question about your guys' first round pick from last year. What, as an outsider, you know, I didn't watch a lot of Giants last year. I know the stats look bad on Evan Neal. I've heard countless people talk about Evan Neal's. Oh yeah, because he all had two. Because he had the Bears one as well. But anyways, what happened with Evan Neal? Because I thought he was a rock solid guy, like insert and offensive tackle, kind of like corner, like you said.
Yep.
An offensive tackle rookie. Struggling means they're running par for the course, but the numbers look like real serious struggles. So I'm curious on the Giants end, like as someone who watches all of their games, what do you see with Evan Neal that was happening?
So I agree with you. Offensive tackle is a really difficult one, especially it's one that honestly, if you have a good roster, when you draft an offensive tackle at the right time, you shouldn't need to play him right away. Unfortunately, the Giants desperately needed that. So he was thrust in there. It's kind of a position switch. He had to move to the right side. Bobby Johnson is a strange offensive line coach. Does not believe in vertical setting. Was like a big thing. I'm not a big O-line guy in terms of the X's and O's and stuff like that. But yeah, doesn't believe in vertical sets. So a lot of like lateral steps and stuff like that was not really Evan Neal's game. And I think he came in a little heavier than I think you want. And I think that the biggest problem for him was getting out of his stance. He was just a step too slow getting out of his stance. And like the NFL, portions of a second mean everything, let alone whole seconds. You know what I mean? So a lot of it was just he was in chase mode before he was even, out of his 3-point stance. We've seen some improvement with that in training camp this year. I've seen some clips, but I myself have not been there to see it on a consistent basis or anything like that. But yeah, like tackle to me, only like the studs of tackles are able to just jump in there and be like that. And as highly touted as Evan Neal was, and as highly drafted as he was, I would not say that he reminded me of Andrew Thomas in the draft, who I was all for them taking it for. I was a big Andrew Thomas guy. I saw him as a plug-and-play left tackle. And even though Evan Neal was picked only one slot lower, I didn't see him as a plug-and-play guy. I knew that he would need some work, but he had all the things that you want. Big, long guy, big body, huge fucking guy. Yeah, it's just going to be time with him. And I think that shedding weight in the offseason and continuing to work at the NFL level, at the NFL speed, I think he'll round out over time. It may not even be right away this year.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, Andrew, like you said, even though he didn't remind you of Andrew Thomas, Andrew Thomas was a guy who did struggle early on as well. And you see it all the time. You see it all the time.
He had different stuff where he was kind of oversetting and undersetting at times, just worried about either getting beat around the edge or getting beat on the inside. He just wasn't trusting himself too much. And that was where he was kind of screwing up. And little different for Neal, but same idea, right?
Yeah. Now, so with the wide receiver core here, I mean, adding Darren Waller has the potential to be a huge difference for this offense, I think. And I'm curious what your expectations are, though, for Isaiah Hodgins as a guy who kind of came out of nowhere. Like, I remember hype about him as a UDFA, or was he a 7th round pick? One of those two. And then, like, he just exploded on the scene last year. What do you see coming from him this year?
He's another one where I have like measured expectations. I would not say that he overachieved last year. I think that probably people, including myself, didn't really know him. We were unfamiliar with his game, if you will. But really solid route runner, great hands, and tough as nails. I mean, he's not a guy who goes out there and just gains a ton of separation. But he is a guy who is more than willing to take hits, fight for the ball, and come out with the ball in his hands just about every time. Solid route running helps him. It gets him in good situations. And I think that he's like a clutch chain mover kind of guy, if that makes sense. But he's not really like Amari Cooper out there, or anything like that. But I think that his role in the team is very, very important. And an offense that kind of works around just getting people in space, he has his spot in that where he can be trusted in tight situations to get the ball in and secure it in his hands. So that's kind of where I expect him.
Once you get a guy like Paris Campbell out there with him who, is going to help create that space, create those windows for him, I think that's the type of player you can win with because he is so good at just bodying guys in his spot, right?
Yeah, and I think also you have really good, I don't know what you really want to call them, quote unquote, like clear out guys at all three levels, right? With Paris Campbell kind of in the short range, Darren Waller in the intermediate range, and Jalin Hyatt can certainly take the top off of a defense. So, I mean, all three of those guys can let guys like Daniel Bellinger and Isaiah Hodgins flourish. And even I would say like Saquon Barkley out of the backfield. They would all benefit just from having those guys on the field with them. Yeah,
it's almost like the sum of the parts are greater, I guess, than the total.
Right.
Like where them together should be more valuable than any one of them individually.
Correct. Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, I'll be honest, just sitting here, like I threw this graphic together earlier today. I went, oh yeah, they got Jalin Hyatt. That's right. And then I was sitting here, I completely forgot about him, 10 hours later. But Jalin Hyatt, that can really add, and that brings some nice depth to this wide receiver room, I feel like.
Well, I'm curious about your thoughts on him as a fellow draft guy, because he had some first round hype for the Giants, and I was not about it. I was very against the idea of the Giants picking him in the late first round, and they were able to squeeze him in at the third, which I was ecstatic about.
Yeah.
But I'm curious what I don't know. How did you feel about him as a draft prospect?
I was surprised his 40 wasn't faster. To be completely frank, because on tape it looked faster.
Right.
But regardless of what the 40 was, I believe his explosive testing was still strong, which matched the tape. Explosive player. I mean, he's just electric out there, man. And I mean, the only reason I wouldn't be okay with a first round pick grade on him is the Tennessee offense. I don't know what's real there. I don't know what is transferable, what's translatable. I don't know how much of a route tree he knows or he's capable of learning quickly. So that would be the concern. But at the end of the day, the guy he knew how to get open in the deep parts of the field, and that's a valuable trait.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That Tennessee offense is fake as most tits these days. So.
And I think with a lot of burners, you get really worried about skinny guys who are going to get hurt. So football's it's inherently a big guy sport, but I feel like Hyatt is a pretty compactly built dude where I'm not as concerned about that, but he still has that deep threat ability, which is kind of less injury risk, I feel like, with his body type.
Yeah, I would say I was more concerned about Wan'Dale Robinson's injury situation, and he got hurt right away last year and then came back and then tore his ACL in his breakout game against the Lions, I think. Yeah,
I remember that one game. And be like, oh, he did it. Okay. Now, on the defensive side, man,
hit me.
I love this D-line. I love this D-line, man. I can't help it as a guy who just really appreciates the play in the pits. Like, let me ask you this. Dexter Lawrence is a top insert number defensive tackle in the NFL. What's the number?
Currently, guys like currently at where they are?
Yeah.
He has to be top 5.
Yeah, I mean,
I would say. I would say you could probably make an argument for top 3. I'm sure some people would get really bent out of shape with me saying that, and probably like Chiefs fans might get mad at me. But yeah, I mean, he's an animal in both phases of the game. He's an elite run stopper, and last year he had his breakout year as a pass rusher.
I almost feel like he's a new breed of guys, because you don't see these guys often who can truly be a nose tackle, but be a real like top of the league type threat as a pass rusher. You don't find guys like that who have that mass to be a true nose. Like, it's just incredible.
So he was drafted in the first round by Dave Gettleman. In the year we also drafted Daniel Jones. We had 3 first-round picks that year. 2 of them were planned. 1 we traded up for. And I had done work on Dexter Lawrence, but I really didn't expect the Giants to identify him or do anything. So when we drafted him, I was like, oh, let me look at my notes. I hadn't thought about him in like a couple weeks now. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, dude, this guy plays all over the defensive line at Clemson. Like, he was just everywhere. He was on the end, right on nose, and at the 3 technique. He was all over the place on the line. And I was like, the immediate fan reaction, and not just Giants fan, football fan, was the Giants just spent a first-round pick on a 2-down run stuffer. And I was like, that's not what my notes say. That doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. And it took some time for him to blossom, perhaps get in the right defense, perhaps get the right guys around him. But he was grading out very well by like his second year. It was only until this past year when the Giants themselves got good and his sack number got high that the rest of the NFL seemed to realize who Dexter Lawrence was. So, I mean, Giants fans who paid close attention, not just myself, lots of Giants fans, we knew who Dexter Lawrence was for a little bit. But now, I mean, this was exactly what we hoped he would become. And now you've got him next to Leonard Williams. You've got Ashawn Robinson coming in. They just went out and got Nunez Roaches as well. It's hard not to like this defensive line. I would argue it's probably the strongest part of the whole team.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, so one thing that kind of surprised me was I did not realize Ojulari played so few snaps last year. What was it? Injury that happened? What was it that hit?
I don't remember the exact nature of the injury, but he was injured in his first year as well. Just as a side note, for as few snaps as he got, he had 5.5 sacks.
Yeah,
it's crazy for he had a sack a game for like 4 games in a row. It was pretty crazy. But he showed up to camp last year, ballooned up to like 255, in just pure muscle. And I wasn't one of the people, but I did see it floating around. Giants fans were like, I don't know, that's a lot of weight on his upper body that just suddenly appeared. That might put a lot of like extra torque on like his joints. And it was he barely played at all last year. Really, truly. I don't even, you have the snap numbers. It's
he pathetic. Played 19% of the snaps defensive snaps last year. I got that in my notes.
Yeah, he was just not active for a lot of the games. Hurt for a very large portion in the early part of the year.
Yeah. And then I feel like in most of these episodes, we kind of brush over linebacker pretty quickly, as most of the NFL tends to do. But how's Okereke going to change what you guys do? I mean, I feel like he's kind of a weird ad for a Wink Martindale defense because he's such a coverage linebacker.
Well, that was kind of the big problem. So Wink likes to mix and match. He likes to bring pressure from unexpected places, and that means that coverage comes from unexpected places. So you might see Leonard Williams drop into coverage and 2 safeties come in on an A-gap blitz or something crazy like that. The common problem with bringing exotic blitzes are risky. You're kind of banking on confusing a quarterback, and that might work when you face Sam Howell, right? That'll probably confuse the shit out of Sam Howell. But it's not easy to trick the Aaron Rodgers of the world. They're smart guys. They do a lot of film work. They've been around a long time. They've seen everything. So in those instances, when you start bringing crazy pressures and you're bringing 6-7 guys, you're leaving big holes in the back. And the Giants got burned pretty often last year. They got lucky sometimes. They had good coverage other times. But we haven't had a good linebacker here since like Antonio Pierce. I would say in the 2011 season, they had Michael Boley, who did pretty well as well. And they were good in coverage, and that's what they really haven't had. They tried to bring in Jared Davis last year. That is what it is, and now he's hurt. He's I think he's getting surgery, so he's going to miss probably the whole season. Okereke, on the other hand, is a very coverage linebacker, like you said. He's also incredibly long, really, really long arms. I want to say like cornerback length. And just that extra little bit of length to make pass breakups, it's going to mean all the difference when you're bringing 6'7" guys in the Wink Martindale defense. So this is probably the most transformative defensive addition that they brought in was Okereke.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll be honest, I thought he was going to be a Bear. And then the Bears got Tremaine Edmonds, and I was like, okay, well, I'm cool with that too.
Yeah,
but I
can't argue
thought
with that,
Eberflus was going to pound the table for his guy, but I just didn't realize who his guy was, I guess. But so, I mean, all that to say, I'm a big fan of Okereke's game. I thought he went underrated in Indy for the last few years now. And in the cornerback room, we'll talk through the DBs, and then we'll get to the schedule here. I like what you guys have on the outside between Banks and Jackson. I mean, as I've said already, I like Banks a lot. I was higher than most on him in this class. I thought he was fairly underrated, even as a first round pick. I considered him. I think I had him as CB3 in the class. So I think at 24, that's an absolute steal. Now, like you said, you're worried about people overhyping what he's going to do, and I'm doing the opposite of that right now. So I'm going to pull this back a little bit, that rookie corners do tend to struggle. But, I mean, I think pairing him with Adoree Jackson could be really solid. But is Jackson going to stay healthy here? Played 50% of the snaps last year. Was that kind of a recurring thing, or is that something that was more one-off?
Man, any Giants fan that's watching this, I think like 7 blood vessels burst in eyeballs when you just said it. So Adoree Jackson has a storied history in the NFL of injuries, right? His injury last year occurred on a punt return because Richie James fumbled 2 punt returns in the week prior. They pulled him. They put Jackson back there. And the moment that it was announced that Adoree Jackson was fielding punts in practice that week, every Giants fan was like, please don't do this. Please don't do this. And it was the first punt return that he went to do. He got tackled awkwardly. He got hurt. And that was the only time he missed. He missed several games. And it was only because of that. As far as being a defender, he didn't get hurt at all. So if they can wise up with special teams and not ever do that again, I think that Adoree Jackson can probably stay healthy. But they have some cool stuff going on in the back. They in the late rounds, they picked Trey Hawkins out of Old Dominion, who did not make a lot of draft buzz, and that's fine. The only reason people like me knew about him is because the Giants brought him in for a visit, so we did some due diligence, and lo and behold, they drafted him. Super long guy, 6'3". He's already earned some first-team snaps in training camp, so he's already impressing way beyond expectations. Also, guys like Nick McLeod, they pulled from Buffalo last year, did a lot of special teams work, filled in for Adoree Jackson, and surprised me right away. I think that Nick McLeod is a versatile DB that can move into some safety situations, can move into the slot if needed. He can move to the outside. He's just a gamer. He's a good man corner. And the Giants are blessed to have Jerome Henderson as their defensive backs coach. I truly think in the next couple of years, it's going to be a name that you hear around the NFL as a defensive coordinator candidate. Every D coordinator that's come through here, he's been retained through all the firings that have happened over the last couple of years. Everyone raves about him, and guys like Nick McLeod come in from Buffalo as nobodies, and they earn themselves new deals to stay with the team. And we've already heard that Nick McLeod's being worked all over the defense in the backfield. So whether Jackson gets hurt or Banks struggles a little bit, I feel very confident in the group that they're building here. Remember, it's still only year 2 of this, roster construction. Adoree Jackson could still be retained. His contracts technically end at the end of this year, so they have to be planning for life without Jackson in case they can't retain him anyway. And it seems obvious to me with the way that they're attacking the DB room and offseason stuff.
And then to get back to a question that you had, kind of a question that you threw out there a while ago about Joe Schoen. So the Giants were hiring their GM the same time the Bears were. And Joe Schoen was who I was I wanted the Bears to go higher. I thought if you're not following the Bills right now, you're doing it wrong. Like as far as the way that they're building a team and the way their front office was doing things. So I still think very highly of Joe Schoen from an outsider outside the New York Giants bubble perspective. Personally, I was a little bit perplexed as to how he handled the Saquon Daniel Jones thing here, but at the end of the day, I mean, you saying this kind of made me think about it this way. Like, he got it done at the end of the day, which is really kind of what matters here. But so
and they can franchise Saquon again.
Yep.
Yeah. So that probably isn't. I'm not knocking him much there on that. Then at that point, so he's still just kind of in the same boat from my perspective. I mean, I'm probably not sitting here saying pounding the table that he's one of the best GMs in the league, but I respect him a lot, and I think of him as like up and coming still.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Remember though, he is super duper young as far as GMs go. So he's impressed me a lot through 2 years. Remember, what he had to do with Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones at the same time. You have two premier players. You can't let a quarterback that you're comfortable with go, because they'll go. Someone will take Daniel Jones. No matter all the memes of him tripping, running free from the Eagles, it doesn't matter. You can throw up his rookie interception stats if you really want to. Someone was going to take him if the Giants didn't retain him. That's just a fact.
Hey, so Carson Wentz got 2 jobs after the Eagles, man.
That's definitely true.
Former MVP Carson Wentz, sir.
So, I mean, they had to do what they had to do in order, and they got the Daniel Jones deal signed at the 0 hour. I mean, within minutes of the deadline. So that forced them into the situation that if it came down to it, this was the one that they wanted, where they would rather use the tag on Barkley because Barkley has 0 leverage. And not for nothing, it's not like that was his first move. Barkley was offered an extension midway through the year. So Joe Schoen's handling of it is a little give and take. I'm not going to put any blame on Saquon Barkley. Every player should go out there and make the money that they want to make, that they feel they deserve. And he's certainly a guy that is a household name for non-football fans, right? But that being said, that was how I would have I would rather franchise Saquon Barkley than Daniel Jones any day of the week. And Barkley really was stuck in a corner at that point. He had nothing that he could. I mean, that's ultimately why they signed a contract and he showed up day one of camp. So, I mean, I can't fault anybody. Now, I will say we've mentioned it, that they can still franchise tag Saquon Barkley next year. If that becomes the case, even though they have $50 million in cap space next year, that's a little shitty. I'll say that. But,
Yeah, that a little shitty. But it's a running back.
Yeah, no, I mean, whether we want to talk about running back positional value, et cetera, it is one of the most injured positions in sports, and they have to be preparing for life beyond him, whether they want to keep him for 3, 5, 7, 11 years or just this year. It doesn't matter. They have to plan for the eventual life without Saquon Barkley. So,
yeah, I mean, until the NFLPA finds leverage somewhere to get rid of the franchise tag, which I think is like one of the most bullshit things in all of sports. I mean, you got to do what you got to do.
Right. Or find some way to resolve it so that, I don't know, that kind of thing doesn't happen. I mean, Jimmy Graham kind of had his own issue with the franchise tag when he wanted to be on the tag as a wide receiver, not a tight end. Tackles and guards are on the same franchise tender, and that's not really fair either. So the tag itself, you're right. It's kind of bullshit. There's tweaks to be worked out, but the NFLPA doesn't stick up for its players. So,
yeah, I mean, it's the worst thing in all of sports as far as like ownership advantage over players.
It's probably up
you're
there.
Probably right. Yeah.
I don't know what second, but like it's got to be up there.
Like, especially like when you look at like the average NFL career, like when you look at 1 year, you're looking at probably over 30% of her career a lot of times.
Yeah, but we want to jump into the schedule here, and we'll just roll through it. Usually we go through these in 4s, so like we'll just plow through Dallas, Arizona, San Fran, Seattle. What do you see them doing there?
So
1-4, 1-3.
no, I actually I see this as 2-2.
2-2. So are you thinking Arizona, Seattle there, or something different?
I think it's either going to be Arizona, Seattle, or Arizona, San Francisco. Remember that quick turnaround to San Francisco plays against them just as much as it plays against us. There's a high likelihood that the Giants are just going to stay on the West Coast. I mean, I by high likelihood, I think like 103% chance that they're going to stay on the West Coast. So perhaps the travel won't impact them as much. You never know. But I do, for you, my friend, I do see that opening week as a loss.
I see it as a loss as well. But so now looking at the next stretch, Miami, Buffalo, Washington, New York, Jets. That's a brutal stretch right there. At Miami, at Buffalo.
We'll get Miami without Ramsey.
Never easy. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I mean, do you have a receiver that can take advantage of that?
I think not having Jalen Ramsey, any receiver can take advantage of. I mean, I think really, I think this is a Darren Waller game. I think that was like my notes on this when I looked at the schedule. I just saw this matchup as just Darren Waller might just be a total mismatch in this game. And I actually like the matchup in the trenches against Miami. So I actually have that one as a pretty comfortable win. I mean, I don't think I could. Do I really even have to say anything about Buffalo? I'm going to that Buffalo game, but making that a Sunday night game,
that's going to be a win
for the Giants.
It's going to be a Giants win, yes, sir.
Why is that?
Because Josh Allen's the most overrated quarterback in the NFL.
All right, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of regression coming out of Buffalo this year in a very, very tough division.
I think the hardest one in that one is the Jets. I just don't know. I mean, everything tells me that they're going to be a legit team this year, but
they should be good, but
it just
they could also be very bad.
It feels like it's going to fall apart, right?
It
I'm not saying it will, but every time things fall apart, it looks like this first.
I've said that about the Packers for the last 10 years. I was like, oh, they're done. And then Aaron Rodgers kept breaking my heart. And now that I'm actually kind of cheering for the guy in that AFC East, I'm like, now he's going to suck. After he's ripped my heart out time and time again.
I feel like if the Jets are like teetering right there, this game against the Giants could be like the last piece to just like push them over, because a defense like Wink is that's what's going to be like the last straw. You know, that facing that defense, that if stuff goes their way, they're just eating and eating and eating, could just break the camel's back kind of thing.
Listen, man, you're new to this area, so I want you to take note of how insane the Philly fans get about their Eagles. Jets and Giants fans are just as insane. I mean, like, one bad game and they're the worst thing that's ever happened to the franchise. You know, you're absolutely right. If the Jets are teetering and they lose this game to the Giants, that means a lot to Jets fans. I think it means a lot to a lot of Giants fans as well. Perhaps not as many, but you're totally right. It could all fall apart right at that game. That's absolutely true.
All right, and then next stretch here, you got at Raiders, at Dallas, at Washington, New England. How do you see that going?
I feel pretty good about this stretch. I'll never.
3-1.
What's up?
3-1 stretch.
I have this as a 3-1 stretch. My loss is against New England. I think that's the one where we're just kind of we're really looking at this as like less about the players, and it's more like Daboll is kind of playing against Belichick. That's the way I kind of look at that, and that sucks. But I do think with the Dallas game, I think that's going to be a close one. But I do think this coaching staff is very good at adjusting to what they make mistakes on, and I think that's where their win comes from in this game. Washington, you know, until I even see who's playing quarterback this year, whether it's Jacoby Brissett or Sam Howell, I'm going to write it in as a win until I see one of them play well. And the Raiders, should Josh McDaniels even be a coach?
Who knows, man? I mean,
No. Nobody's ever gotten more credit off the back of somebody else in the history of the NFL.
Yo, you might be right, dude.
But yeah, I mean, I think their loss comes to either Dallas or Washington. I just don't think New England's that good of a team. I think New York's going to match up really, really well with them. Like I said, I think Washington's tough, and like 3 road games in a row. You got the Raiders, Dallas, and Washington all over the country too. It's not like they're all similar locations either.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's tough. And I think you lose to either Dallas or Washington in that stretch, but I think you split Dallas, Washington, beat the Raiders, beat the Patriots. So basically the same thing.
Yeah, I see the Patriots as like a toss-up there, but I think Raiders and Washington are definitely winnable for them. I might do Washington as a toss-up just because it's in Washington, and I just have this feeling with the new ownership there that team's going to get a bit revived, and that defense is still nasty.
And Ron Rivera's a good coach, man.
Yeah, he's a hell of a coach. And then coming off
That's
the
why I
bye,
wanted Dallas to hire.
That would have been a heck of a hire for Dallas. Coming off the bye, last 5-game stretch here. So Green Bay, at New Orleans, at Philly, LA Rams, and then at home against Philly. How you see that playing out?
5-0.
I actually have us. My co-host feels very good about the way we're going to end the season. I actually feel like we're going to kind of limp into the playoffs here. I'm going to start backwards. I think by week 18, Philly's not really playing, right? I mean, as much as that rivalry means something, they are very serious about how close they were to winning a Super Bowl last year. They are not going to screw around. And I think that there will be plenty of guys resting week 18. I think that one's going to be a win for us. The Rams, I think they mortgaged a couple of years of their future to win a Super Bowl.
They might be the worst team in the NFL.
Yeah, they really screwed up. Well, they didn't screw up. They won a Super Bowl, but it comes at a price. Yeah. Playing Philly on Christmas.
I mean, they're going to get Caleb Williams.
Maybe. I mean, does he have to declare?
Keep him in LA. No, he doesn't. But
yeah, I mean, if he gets hurt,
I'm sure number 1 pick.
If he gets hurt,
I think he goes to LA with. No, if the Rams and Sean McVay have the number 1 overall pick, he's going no matter what.
No, I'm saying if he gets hurt, he may not declare.
No, I'm
saying.
They're picking him, and if he gets hurt, I don't think he cares.
Yeah,
Andrew Luck stayed for all 4 years too.
Yeah, that was even before NIL, but I think Caleb's going to the NFL pretty much as fast as he can, as long as the Green Bay Packers don't have the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, I could see a team like Green Bay, like most of the other like Midwest outdoor cold cities like Bengals and like kind of poverty franchises that won't even build an indoor practice facility. They already got their quarterbacks, so.
All right, so of the bets that we have up here, the wins over under, the playoff odds, win division, any of those, or anything else that you can just think of off the top of your head, what do you like for the Giants if you're a betting man?
Well, I'm not much of a betting man. I will tell you that. I do not like them to win the Super Bowl. I don't like them to win an NFC championship. I don't like them winning the division either. I don't like any of those odds. But I do like them making the playoffs. I think that with the extra wild card spot, they would have to go even below my expectations, which I think are pretty measured, to not make the playoffs, especially when you look at the NFC. I don't really look
very weak.
See too much. Yeah. Over under for wins. I think it'll be over 7.5. Yeah.
If you make the playoffs, you're gonna have to win more than 7 games.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fair to think that they might win 9 to 10 games. Pretty close to last year in terms of the win total.
Yeah, I mean, so you'll come off the bye with 5 wins, so you just have to have 4 weeks going into the bye, and you're good.
You think we're only getting 5 wins in those first couple weeks?
No, I'm saying you're coming off the bye with 5 wins in a row.
So
you just have to win 4 before then.
I got you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I think I'm
Philly's most overrated team in the NFL.
I think I'm actually with you on the over. I have 8 wins that I'm counting here, 7 to 8, but I'm gonna round it up to 8 because I had 7. I have an odd number of toss-ups, so that gives me a uneven number. So I have them at 7.5, exactly where the over/under's at. But I'll round it up to 8, especially when you factor in the last week of the season against Philly in New York Philly might be resting their people. At that point, I really think the over's strong with that last game being against Philly. But if I like the over,
Philly's going to be rested because they're
probably
going to be tanking for the number one overall pick.
Yeah, that. I probably like the playoffs better just because it's plus 165. And if I have them winning 8 games, I like the playoffs more. So give me the playoffs.
Yeah, I think 8 games gets the playoffs for this NFC.
Yeah.
Other thing to note, that other Philly game is on Christmas Day. And one thing that my co-host pointed out is you may not be getting the standard Lincoln Financial crowd because of that. You might be getting
they hate Christmas.
They hate fun and happy feelings. Yeah. So, we may not be seeing the same hostile environment in that game. And if they come in there on a roll, they could shock people and win that game as well. So
they booed Santa Claus out of the stadium and threw beer bottles and snowballs at him.
When was that? Every year?
No, that's like a very famous.
That was like in the 80s.
Oh
maybe
yeah.
70s? Or no, 90s.
Very, very famous.
I don't even know.
Like, yeah.
I just know I've seen clips.
Like they boo him out of the stadium. They're throwing beer bottles and snowballs at him as he's
it's
leaving.
the nearest stadium that I have not even considered going to. So
yeah, my brother lives right outside Philly, and we thought about going to a game, and we're just
didn't do it, huh?
we'll go to Happy Valley. We'll go catch Penn State.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, Grump, thank you for coming on, talking Giants with us. Can you tell everyone one more time where to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys again for having me. This is a lot of fun. I love talking this. I can talk football any day of the week at any time. So I appreciate you guys having me on. My Giants podcast is the Just Giants podcast. It's on iTunes, SoundCloud, etc. It's also on YouTube with my co-host, The Cranky Fan. But if you're not a Giants fan, but you still like football, like I said, I do college draft stuff. That's my favorite thing to do. That does not involve my favorite team in the world. So me, the Football Grump, follow me on Twitter or X or whatever it's called these days. I'm pretty active on there with that stuff. And I started my own Football Grump YouTube channel that throughout the college season, I'm going to be having more and more videos about matchups and guys who had good weeks, guys who surprised, and just guys who caught my eye. I mean, it's going to be kind of free form. But once the draft itself kicks up, I'll be down in Mobile, probably again next year for the Senior Bowl. And all that draft stuff will be on that channel. So if you're not a Giants fan, that's where you can follow me there.
I don't know if you watch college football specifically for draft prospects or you actually enjoy it, but if you don't have a college football team, like I know a lot of people in the Northeast don't, check out the Texas Tech Red Raiders this year. They're going to have a squad.
There you go. Listen to that.
Wreck 'em.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. Thank you for coming on, and we'll catch you later.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Take care, guys.